Welcome back to our daily Bible study. I'm Matthew Gage, pastor at Faith Baptist Church in Decatur, Texas. We'll be in Genesis chapter number 30. Genesis chapter number 30. And in this chapter, we will continue the soap opera that is Jacob's personal life with his multiple wives, and they're going to multiply here in this chapter. And also, we're going to get into some of the business dealings between Jacob and his uncle Laban and leading up to his departure. So, got a lot of interesting stuff here. It's fairly lengthy, 43 verses here. Might take us a little while to go through some of this. There's some interesting things and names and stuff, and I'm sure I'll chase a few rabbits. But let's see what we can do. Genesis chapter number 30. To set this up, you'll remember that from chapter number 29, that Jacob had worked 7 years to marry Rachel. Laban pulled a switcheroo on him, and instead of marrying Rachel, he marries Leah, who he didn't want. He agrees to work 7 more years for Rachel. He has married them both. God has blessed Leah, and she has bore 4 sons. That's a big deal, bearing sons in this culture. So she's born 4 sons, and Rachel has born 0. So the scoreboard I talked about there, you can just go ahead and remember that. That's the score going into this. It's 4-0 on the son count between Rachel and Leah. So we're going to pick up here verse number 30. Chapter number 30, verse number 1. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. I don't think that's being a drama queen or an exaggeration. This is almost shameful in those days. If a woman did not bear children, there was all kinds of thought that there's something wrong, and our divine judgment upon her. This is a very, very big deal. And now she's being upstaged by her sister. She is desperate to have children. Verse 2. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel, and he said, Am I in God's stead? Who hath withheld thee the fruit of the womb? So, what am I doing? Well, it's not my fault. We're doing everything we can. You haven't had children. Verse number 3, here's her plan to finally get a point on the board in that scoreboard. Verse 3, and she said, Behold my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. So she says, okay, if I can't have children, my maid can have children. Take her to a wife also, and I guess she'll still be under me. It's kind of interesting here. I wonder if this is more of like a concubine kind of thing in this relationship, but she's saying, look, you take my maid to be a wife also. She'll still kind of be under me. Therefore, these children are still kind of mine also because my maid had them. It's a very strange kind of deal here. So verse number 4, and she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. And Bilhah conceived, and bare Jacob a son. Verse 6, and Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. So Rachel is excited here. Note here, even Bilhah doesn't even name the child. So Rachel kind of takes this child, a surrogate, I guess you could say, and somehow in this deal, names him Dan. Dan means judging. So, God's looked down and God has now helped me and we're getting even again here. So in this scoreboard, I'm not going to keep doing this the whole time because I'm going to get confused and get the numbers off. But in this case, now Rachel has a point on the board scored by her maid, Bilhah. And so now the score is 1-4, Rachel is behind Leah at this point. Verse number 7, and Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali, which means wrestling. So you think about this. I mean, the picture of what's taking place inside that home, is it a happy home? Absolutely not. She's saying, I have struggled, I have fought, I have wrestled. There's been combat. Probably more figurative than literally, I think. But she said, that's been the state of things. I've been at war with my sister, and I'm gaining victories now. Score is now 4-2. Verse 9, when Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her Jacob to wife. So Leah's sitting over there saying, wait a minute, score's 4-2. Oh, we can bring in people from the bench? Okay, I'll bring in my maid too. You can marry her, Jacob. Why Jacob lets this happen, I don't know. Verse number 10. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a son. And Leah said, a troop cometh. And she called his name Gad. I just love that, a troop cometh. I was thinking about that. I was reading over this before I recorded, and I think she's thinking, boy, here comes the landslide. We're gonna have so many kids, we're gonna outnumber whatever whatever Rachel and Bilhah can do. The Leah Zilpah team will outscore them. I'm not sure if that's exactly what that means, to be honest, but just my comedy brain was thinking that. Verse 12, and Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher. Asher means adding. The score keeps going up. So she's saying, look, everybody's going to look and say, boy, look how lucky, how blessed. God is blessed, has blessed Leah, and she's prospering. Look at all these sons that are born to her and to her, to her handmaid / co-wife. I don't know what phraseology you would put on that. Verse 14. We have a curious little story here in the middle, and this takes place in the middle of everything else that's going on. Verse number 14. And Reuben, who's Reuben? Remember that he is the oldest son of Leah. It says, and Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. She sees those and says, hey, I want some of those. Verse 15, and she said unto her, is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And wouldst thou take away my son's mandrakes also? Boy, talk about throwing a little shade here. Leah's response back to Rachel. And it says, and Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. She said, okay, we'll give you a deal. You get the husband tonight. I get the mandrakes. You get the husband tonight. Once again, poor Jacob. Look at verse 16. Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, thou must come in unto me, for surely I've hired thee with my son's mandrakes. Boy, he's got to be scratching his head. What are you talking about? And they hear the whole story. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to your tent tonight. Just, like I say, soap opera is one of the best terms I can think of for this family, and it continues on. This is not going to stop anytime soon. Let's see. So it says, the end there, verse number 16, lay with her that night, and God hearkened, verse 17, unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob the fifth son. So she had 4. Now number 5 comes along, which that's her score is now 7. Verse 18, and Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. Issachar means a hire. She's kind of gotten her reward, her wage, her earnings from this arrangement. Verse 19, and Leah conceived again and bare Jacob the 6th son. And Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. I hope I'm saying that one pretty close. That means a dwelling, basically saying, oh, now Jacob will dwell with me, because look at all the sons I have given him. 6 through her own bearing, also 2 through her handmaid / co-wife. Just craziness here. Verse 21. And afterwards she bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. We'll see her again later. Are there other daughters and things in here? You know, the preeminence of the sons kind of takes the forefront. Are there daughters being born in these relationships? In the case of like Abraham and Sarah, I don't think so, that they appear to have one child together. Some of these other relationships like these, are there some daughters being born? There's verses that hint at that, like some of the early genealogies. It'll talk about, they were born unto him sons and daughters, and those daughters and sons aren't named necessarily, not all of them. So usually the sons are given the preeminence in these genealogies, things. That's the culture back then, and even in the ancient world in general, even up into Roman times, that was the case. It was all about the sons. So, but in this case, it's noted that she bears a daughter, and we will deal with her later. Oh, and by the way, that Dinah means judgment again. So I guess she's saying that God's judged in her favor there. Verse 22. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. Joseph also means an adding, an addition. So here God looks down, in this whole mess. I think God's shaking his head, face palm kind of moments, like, what are these people doing? But here he does bless Rachel, and she finally bears a son, Joseph. Oh yeah, that's that Joseph. If you read ahead, you know the stories. We'll get to him in a little bit. Now, also I like that kind of the faith that she has looking forward to. Well, I'm going to have another one. I have one. I'm going to have another one. I think she's still thinking, we're going to have fourth quarter comeback here. I'm going to have more kids than my sister. All right. So verse number 25. It's at this time right here that there's a kind of a change takes place when Rachel finally bears a son. Jacob gets the urge, the calling to return back to the promised land, and we're going to start seeing that. And that kind of verse 25 is going to kind of transition here and into the next chapter. We're going to start seeing the preparation for Jacob and his ever-growing extended family to leave and return back home to Canaan. Verse 25, and it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away that I may go into mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service, which I have done thee. So he's saying, look, just my wife and kids, let us go. I've served. I've done my best. You've profited from my labor and my assistance. I want my wife and kids, and we're going to return back home. Verse 27, Laban said to him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. I think that's interesting. It's like, no, stay. I like the profit margins. I like where the sales charts are going. I'm benefiting from God blessing you. Don't leave. Verse 28, he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. So we get this deal going here. Verse 29. Let's see, that was Laban speaking, verse 28. And then verse 29, this is back to Jacob. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little when thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased into a multitude, and the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. And now shall I provide for mine own house also? It's like, look, I've been here, been working for you. Your herds have prospered through this, but I need to take care of my family. Look at all these mouths to feed. I got all these wives, all these kids. I got to provide for them. Verse 31, Laban says, and he said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flocks. I was like, okay, Laban, let's make a deal. These two, in their deals and their connivery, I don't know if that's even a word, but the way they're trying to get advantage on each other, Jacob's going to try to do that again. Verse 32, Jacob speaking, I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So it says, okay, I'll go. All the ones that have this type of marking on their fur, the speckled, spotted. I'm not an expert at all in the genetics and herds and things like that. Grew up on a dairy farm. I know a little bit of some of the genetics and things like that, how important they are, and when you crossbreed and do things. But basically, he's sitting here saying, okay, all the ones that have these characteristics, I will take them. And in my mind, I think that Laban knows, oh, that's not too bad. Most of them are solid color. That they wouldn't fall in this category. It's not like 3/4 of the animals would be going with Jacob. And Laban just kind of strokes his beard and says, okay, that sounds good. I'm still coming out pretty good on this. As long as you're going to stay and take care of them, you stay and take care of them, they're going to prosper. We're going to have more and more and more. And this will work out good. We'll both benefit from this. Verse 33, so shall my righteousness answer for me in the time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face, every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, the same shall be counted stolen from me. So it says, you'll get to keep all the solid colored ones. Verse 34, Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. And he removed that day the he goats that were ring straight and spotted, and all the she goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. So Laban says, okay, well, we'll do this. So there's some setting up some things here. Now, what's going to happen here in the last part of this chapter, the last few verses in this deal, quite frankly, I've never read a good explanation on. There's practical explanations, there's superstitious explanations, there are divine providence explanations. Which of these are taking place here? Probably all three, to be honest. I look very practically in the scriptures. I don't discount God's miraculous hand involved. So I think there's some practical things that Jacob is going to do here, and I'll point that out. I think Jacob may be doing some of these out of superstition. These may not be something that would work in today's agriculture or even back then. I think there may be a little superstition kind of involved. But at the end of the day, God was in control. So I think you have all three elements of this. And when we get into chapter 31, there's a few statements that will be made that I think shed a little bit more light onto this business agreement. All right, so we have the people, the flocks are divided, and Jacob has been given charge of them, and so they've split them up, 3 days journey between these flocks. Now, we're not going to interfere with each other. We're not going to, just come over here and breed ours and interbreed them. No, we're going to spread these apart. Verse 37, and Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and peeled white streaks in them, and made the white appear which was in the rod. So he basically gets these rods, peels the bark off and kind of makes them striped looking. Verse 38, and he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks and the gutters in the watering troughs which the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. So he takes these striped sticks and rods, puts them in front of the sheep, and you'll see verse 39, and the flocks conceived before the rods and brought forth cattle ring straight, speckled, and spotted. So the superstitious aspect of this would say, well, Jacob is saying, if I have these striped sticks in front of them, then when they conceive, they're going to see these and produce, or in the presence of these, it's going to produce a striped or speckled, not a solid color animal. That's a superstitious thing. The practical explanation of this that I would say is, Well, he's putting these before their eyes. I think maybe he is doing some selective breeding. And maybe when he's talking about putting these things before their eyes, he's building some like fences and things and splitting up when all the flocks are coming together, and they're crowded together, and that's some animals in heat, that's when they're going to try to mate and things like that, that he's splitting them up maybe with some fencing and some pens as they come for water. My practical mind really leans that way. But like I say, I've never read a good explanation on what's happening on this. And even some people that I've trusted that know a lot on ancient culture and try to, read into this and figure this stuff out, scratch their heads at what Jacob exactly is doing right here. I'm not saying somebody doesn't understand it and has a great explanation. I haven't ran across it. Verse 40, and Jacob did separate the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring straight, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves and put them not unto Laban's cattle. And it came past when, so right there we see he's splitting out. He's continually culling out the herd and separating the solid and the speckled and those things. And, basically, like I say, I see a lot of selective breeding and things going on in what he's doing. Verse 41, came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. And when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feeble were Laban's and the stronger Jacob. So here he is, like I said, this is straight up selective breeding, saying, I don't want a weak calf born, so I'm going to make sure that in my little breeding plan here, I want the strongest to be there. So the ones that are healthy and strong, I'll let them reproduce. These other ones I'm going to keep out of my breeding program. And so like I said, this to me, I see so much about selective breeding. This is exactly what a rancher would do. Anybody with a herd, anybody with a flock would be doing this, trying to increase the genetics and the bloodlines of their stock. So I see him doing that in what's going on. I'm just pointing out. I grew up on dairy farm. I've been around ranching and things like that here in Texas. I don't know that much about sheep. My wife has a couple of goats. I don't understand them at all. But I was just saying, I've seen this kind of stuff, and I know the talk and some of the planning and things that go into that. I really think that's a lot of what Jacob's doing here from the practical aspect. Now, won't get too far ahead, but in the next chapter, basically God's going to say, I did it. God said, I blessed. At the end of the day, we do all we can. God is still the one that brings the increase. God is still the one that is allowing them to conceive and bringing forth, healthy offspring and increasing the flocks and providing the weather and the grass and things. Ultimately, who did it? God did it. So I talked about that, practical, superstitious, and divine. All three may be at play here. I lean a little less towards superstition. Some people put a little more in there, but I think all three are at play, but the greater thing is that God was working among them. Verse 43, and the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle and maidservants and men servants and camels and asses. So at the end of this time period, as this deal struck, hey, take care of my sheep a little bit longer here. And I was looking ahead. I saw some references to it being a total of 20 years that Jacob serves. When this is going on, I'm not sure. It's possibly another 6 years, I guess, if that 20. I didn't see that. I may just not have looked far enough ahead. I just saw that reference in some of the books I was looking at. So, but in this few years, what's happened? Jacob is prospering. He's getting rich. Now, Laban also is. Laban is increasing also, but Jacob has worked this deal to his advantage. So there we go. We wrapped up chapter number 30. A lot of fun stuff in that one, from the soap opera to this breeding program that he has in the business deal and everything that takes place. So next time we will get in chapter number 31, and we'll get Jacob headed back to the promised land. So look forward to that. I appreciate you watching. I hope it's been a help and a blessing to you.